And so now I'm getting to the main event for the UK card, which was Gennady Golovkin successfully defending his WBC, WBA Super, and IBF World Championship belts. Well, technically not the WBA actually, since they never sanctioned the fight with Kell Brook. But incidentally, he defended his belts, his overall status as essentially the man to beat at middleweight. Although Saul Canelo Alvarez may have something to say about that. And he defeated Kell Brook in just a brutal fashion in the 5th round. After some possibly shaky early rounds, I thought that it was a pretty close fight going to that 5th round. I personally had it 2-2, basically an even fight. From what I understand, I believe the judges had it 3-1 for Kell Brook, and I can't necessarily disagree with that. Kell Brook was doing a solid job of boxing Golovkin, making a miss. Golovkin was getting a little bit wild. I thought he was actually getting wild, similar to the way that Alvarez was getting wild against Amir Khan, where he was kind of throwing lunging hooks, not necessarily really looking to set up his power shots, just kind of tossing them out there, trying to score a brutal knockout of Kell Brook or overall break him down. And of course, eventually he did, but he also wasted a lot of energy, as far as I'm concerned. He wasted some energy. He wasted a lot of punches. And he took some punches of his own that he probably could have avoided. He could have avoided with just a better defense, a little bit more head movement. And it's something that's kind of worried me about Golovkin for the last couple of years, whereby because of the fact that he's been fighting opposition that's really not on his level, he's developed a lot of bad habits because of the fact that he hasn't necessarily needed to use very much of his skills at all. He's only needed to use his skills to a certain degree or to a certain amount in a certain fashion against a lot of these opponents, that he's developed a lot of bad habits. It's left him with some serious technical liabilities, and I think that Kell Brook possibly exposed some of them, which means that hopefully Golovkin can correct those and potentially return to form as long as he's fighting a legit opponent, fight up to the level of his opponent. Or it also may mean, it could mean two other things as well. It could mean that the weight might be getting to him. He may be one of these guys that's, in spite of the fact that, yeah, he's making the 30-day weigh-in with ease, making the 7-day weigh-in with ease well under him, that he may be spending way too long at such a low weight that it actually harms him overall. And so he may just not necessarily be able to recover in that 24 hours from basically putting his body through several weeks or entire training camp of hell while not having that body mass that his body naturally wants to accumulate. Or the other thing could be that he's simply getting old. He's slowing down, his reflexes are slowing down, he's got some just overall wear and tear on his body. Could be any one of those things, or possibly a blend of the three as well, or a blend of two of them. But Brook did a solid job in spite of the fact that he was just physically overmatched in the end. Both guys were ostensibly the same size. They both weighed in at 168 for the IBF morning of weigh-in. Of course, they have that 10-pound limit, so they both had to be below 170, but they were both below 170 with, a couple pounds to spare, so it's unlikely they, gained any more weight than probably what they were the morning of, necessarily, depending on what they decided to eat or drink afterwards, what have you. But basically about the same size, ostensibly, in the ring, but at the same time, just Golovkin, he's just a physically strong guy. He's a guy that's more used to fighting bigger opponents. Used to fighting bigger opponents much more so than Brook is. Brook's usually used to being the bigger guy in the ring. Golovkin's used to being about the same size or a little bit smaller than some of these guys he's been fighting in terms of actual weight once they step in there. So Brook eventually was just kind of worn down. Got that eye busted up, possibly broken. Some people were thinking that he might have gotten his orbital bone broken. I wouldn't be surprised if he did, because Golovkin can hit extremely hard. Got rocked really bad in that first round, but in spite of that, he came back pretty well in that first round as well. But eventually, of course, just by the accumulation of the punches that Golovkin was throwing, a lot of grazing punches, not necessarily all clean, but it seemed like Brook's corner was kind of scared by the whole thing. They decided to throw in the towel, save him the fight another day. I personally thought it wasn't the best stoppage. I mean, it was very much an anticlimax. Putting myself in the fighter's shoes, I would have wanted it to go longer. Putting myself in my own shoes as a viewer, I definitely wanted it to go longer. I wanted to see a longer fight. It was a competitive fight. I wanted to see a conclusive ending to it eventually. But didn't quite get that. But, I mean, it was a good fight while it lasted. It was definitely a good fight while it lasted. Brook put up just a solid display. And I think it was really a more fun fight even than the Khan-Canelo one. Because it was either all Khan or all Canelo. With this fight, there was actually a little bit of a blend between the two. It's like, oh, damn, Golovkin rocked Brook. And then Brook came back. And then all of a sudden, Brook is landing clean on Golovkin. And then Golovkin comes back. And, it's a lot of good little ebbs and flows in what was otherwise an abbreviated fight with a bit of an anticlimax. But one of Golovkin's more fun fights to watch, personally. So with this, Golovkin's talking about he wants to unify all the belts, of course. That's largely being a reference to Billy Joe Saunders, the fact that he wants that WBO as well. Or it could potentially be a reference to Danny Jacobs with that regular WBA title. The WBA has been unifying a bunch of their belts across the lower weight divisions primarily. They still have yet to really mandate all of the ones in the higher weight classes, including middleweight, of course. So, and Danny Jacobs just called out Golovkin yesterday after TKO and Sergio Mora in the 7th round, if I remember correctly. So Jacobs versus Golovkin, I think, is a no-brainer. Put it in New York, settle it out. Probably put it on pay-per-view, do good numbers and everything. I'd love to see the fight. Two huge punchers. It's a don't blink type of a fight, can't miss type of a fight. Probably only goes 3-4 rounds at most because both guys hit extremely hard. So I think that'd be a fun fight. Put whoever you want on the undercard, and I think it sells like hotcakes, man. I'd love to see that fight. As for Kell Brook, he's saying that he's gonna be dropping down to 154 most likely. He's gonna, of course, settle in between 147 and the 160 that they fought out tonight. He called out the winner of Canelo versus Smith, which is, of course, going to be happening next week. So Alvarez versus Liam Smith for Smith's WBO light middleweight title. And I think Brook against the winner of that fight, who I assume is going to be Saul Alvarez, I definitely favor him to win the fight, would be an excellent fight to be made. Of course, it's another big money fight for Brook, another big money fight for Alvarez as well. Just, makes dollars make sense. And I think it's gonna be a good fight. I think considering how many levels Brook showed against Golovkin here tonight or today in the ring, technically and just overall physically, I think that Brook versus Alvarez is a pretty solid fight. Pending how Alvarez looks still at 154 pounds against Smith, albeit who knows? Maybe Alvarez decides 154 is still too hard to make. Maybe he makes himself versus Brook at 157, or maybe even the full 160, because the whole idea is, Alvarez is the bigger man to begin with, and in spite of the fact that he's actually never fought at the full 160, quote unquote, and Brook has, they're basically the same size. Brook and Alvarez basically about the same size guy. So to me, it wouldn't matter what weight it would take place at. As a matter of fact, the higher it goes, probably the more benefit for Alvarez than for Brook, really. But I'd like to see that fight come off, if not any others. Those are the fights that seem to make the most sense to me. Otherwise, Golovkin possibly against Eubank may make a little bit more sense for him as well, since he now has a UK fan base considering what he just did to Brook. Or, Golovkin versus Saunders possibly might make it worth Saunders' while too, because Saunders, Eubank, Golovkin could maybe have his next 2 fights in the UK, make huge money against either of them or both. So be interesting to see any of those fights that I mentioned. Let me know what you guys think of those fights or this fight that just happened. But solid job from Golovkin. It's coming through in spite of the fact that Brook was looking to give him some trouble. Golovkin just pounded right through everything that Brook was trying to do to him technically. Just brutal force to be reckoned with. Even if you're able to outbox him in some spots, you still got to watch out for that power, man, because all he needs is just a couple of clean shots, and it's going to be looking very, very bad for you. Just as I pretty much think that Brook's corner thought it was going to turn out for him if they had let that thing go on. So that's pretty much it on this one, guys. Catch you guys on this one. Peace.